I returned from a business trip, and when I stepped into the house, my entire family was waiting for me. My son said, "Mom, your time is up. Dad is happier with her." I walked out without a word, and then I turned their lives into a living hell. Imagine walking into your own home, exhausted after saving your husband's business, only to find your entire family waiting, not to greet you, but to tear your life apart. The betrayal was a physical blow, a cold, hard truth delivered by the very people I loved most. And what happened next? What they did next made that heartbreak look like a warm-up. The wind coming off the Hudson River that night was sharp, biting. The kind of cold that slips through your coat and settles deep in your bones. I had just landed at JFK after 3 soul-crushing days in Chicago. I'd been fighting tooth and nail to save a deal my husband, Mark, had nearly torpedoed with his sheer arrogance. I was beyond exhausted. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, and my shoulders ached from the impossible weight of my laptop bag. All I craved was a hot shower, a generous glass of Cabernet, and the familiar, comforting silence of my home. I wanted to tell Mark, my husband of 22 years, that I had fixed his mess again, that the sterling Fuentes real estate empire we had painstakingly built together was safe for another quarter. I pulled into the driveway of our Greenwich, Connecticut home. The living room lights were on, glowing a little too brightly against the dark, frost-covered lawn. It struck me as odd. Usually, by 10 p.m., the house would be quiet. Mark would be in his study, and our son, Jake, though technically 21, still my little boy, would be lost in video games or out with friends. I opened the front door, dropping my keys into the bowl on the entryway table. The silence that swallowed me wasn't peaceful. It was thick. Charged. Like the air just before a violent thunderstorm. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing a little too loudly as I hung up my coat. "Mark? Jake? I'm home." Then, a voice drifted from the living room. "Eleanor, we're in here." It was my mother, Carol. My stomach clenched. My mother lived 40 minutes away. What on earth was she doing here on a Tuesday night? A sudden, icy panic seized me. Had something happened to my sister, Jessica? Was someone sick? My heart hammered against my ribs as I rushed toward the living room, bracing myself for bad news. But it wasn't a medical emergency. It was a tribunal. They were all there, arranged almost theatrically on the designer leather couch I had personally chosen last Christmas. Mark sat in the center, impeccably dressed in a crisp white shirt, but he couldn't meet my eyes. To his left, my mother Carol, her posture rigid, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. To his right, Jessica, my younger sister, a smug glint in her eye. And in the armchair next to them, my son, Jake. The atmosphere was suffocating. No one was crying. No one looked sad. They looked resolute. Determined. My breath caught in my throat. "What's going on?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Is everyone okay?" I took a tentative step forward, but Jake stood up. He didn't move to hug me. He planted himself like a security guard blocking a door. His eyes I had looked into with so much love for 2 decades, were devoid of all warmth. "Mom, sit down," he said. His voice was cold, deeper than I remembered, stripped of every ounce of affection. "You need to listen, and you need to not make a scene." "Jake," I pleaded, "you're scaring me." "What is this?" "You need to accept a new reality," he continued, reciting words that sounded rehearsed, almost robotic. "You're not in charge of this family anymore." My head snapped to Mark. "Mark, why aren't you saying anything?" He finally looked up, his handsome face, the face that had been the public image of our company for years, twisted into a mask of pity mixed with pure annoyance. "It's over, Eleanor. The charade is over." Charade? I felt like I was drowning on dry land. The world spun. "Aunt Jessica," Jake continued, gesturing to my sister with a sickening reverence. "She makes Dad happier now. Unlike you, she gets him." The world stopped spinning. It shattered. I looked at Jessica, my little sister. The one whose rent I'd paid for years, whom I had hired when no one else would give her a job. She sat there, legs crossed, wearing a silk blouse that looked suspiciously like one missing from my closet. And then I saw it. Mark's hand. It was resting casually, possessively, on Jessica's knee. "We didn't want you to find out from a stranger," my mother, Carol, chimed in. Her voice wasn't apologetic. It was a lecture. "We wanted to do this as a family. Eleanor, you have to be realistic. You've been married to your job for years. Mark is a man with needs. He needs a wife who is present, not a business partner who sleeps with her laptop." "Mom," I whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than any knife. "You knew about this? You're approving of this?" "I'm supporting happiness," Carol said, lifting her chin defiantly. "Jessica and Mark share a connection. They love each other, Eleanor. It's not something they planned. It just happened. You can't punish them for falling in love." I looked at Jessica. She offered a small, triumphant smile, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. And that's when I saw it, glinting under the recessed lighting. On her finger was a diamond ring. Not just a ring. My ring. The vintage Art Deco diamond Mark had given me for our 20th anniversary. The one that had mysteriously vanished from my jewelry box 6 months ago. I had torn the house apart looking for it, crying for days. Mark had just shrugged, telling me I was careless, that I'd probably lost it at the gym. "That's my ring," I said, my voice trembling with a rage so pure it felt hot in my throat. "It looks better on her," Mark said with a dismissive shrug. "It was a waste on you. You never wear jewelry anyway. We want you to move out," Jake said, breaking the suffocating silence again. "Dad's keeping the house. I'm staying here. It's better if you go. You create too much tension. My son. My boy. Whose fevers I had nursed, whose college tuition I paid for by working 80-hour weeks. He was kicking me out of the house I built. You're choosing this?" I asked Jake, tears finally stinging my eyes. "You're choosing the woman who was sleeping with your father behind my back? She's your aunt, Jake. She's not just my aunt anymore." Jake snapped back, his voice full of venom. "She's the only one who really listens to me. You just throw money at me and tell me to study. Dad and Jessica, they treat me like an adult." I looked at the 4 of them. My husband. My sister. My mother. My son. The 4 pillars of my life. And every single one of them was rotten. They weren't just breaking my heart. They were dismantling my existence with a cruelty that left me breathless. A wave of nausea hit me, but I swallowed it down. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I would not scream. I would not beg. I straightened my spine. I looked at Mark, locking my eyes on his until he flinched and looked away. "You think you've won?" I said, my voice quiet but deadly calm. "You think you can just rewrite history because you're bored and selfish?" "Don't make a scene, Eleanor," Jessica said, her voice cloyingly sweet. "Let's be mature about this divorce." "Divorce?" I let out. A short, dry laugh. "Oh, you have no idea what's coming." "Don't threaten us," Mark snapped, his arrogance returning. "I've already spoken to the lawyers. You're out. The prenup, the company bylaws. I've got it all covered. Walk out that door, Eleanor. If you stay, I'll have security remove you from my property." "His property?" I looked around the opulent room, a bitter smile touching my lips. "I chose every tile in this house. I paid for every brick. And now you're trespassing," Jake said, his voice flat. That was it. The final, irreparable break. I looked at my son one last time, memorizing the face of the stranger he had become. "All right," I said. I turned. I didn't take my coat. I didn't pick up my keys from the bull. I had my spare set in my pocket. I walked to the door. "Where are you going?" Carol shouted, a sudden anxiety in her voice. "Eleanor, we need to discuss the settlement. Mark has a generous offer if you sign tonight." I didn't answer. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the frigid Connecticut night. The wind hit my face, drying the tears before they could even fall. I got into my car, the engine roaring to life in the silent driveway. As I backed out, I saw them through the picture window. They were already pouring champagne. They were celebrating my erasure. I drove into the darkness, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. The Eleanor they knew, the doormat, the provider, the fixer, had died in that living room. And the woman driving away was someone they should be very, very afraid of. Midway subscribe line, by the way, if you're still with me, still reeling from this absolute nightmare, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't believe the next twists in this story, and you definitely don't want to miss what happened next. Main story part 2, stripped bare. If you're listening to this and you're as furious as I was in that moment, please hit the like button and comment with the number 1 below. Let me know you're with me. Your support tells me I'm not alone in this fight. Comment 1 now, because believe me, what they did next made that initial betrayal look like just the warm-up act. I drove for an hour, the lights of Manhattan blurring into red and gold streaks across my windshield. My mind was a chaotic storm of images: Jessica's smug smirk, the ring on her finger, Jake's cold, dead stare. But beneath the shock, a primal instinct was kicking in. Survival. I needed gas. The low fuel light had been on since I left the airport, but I'd been too eager to get home to stop. Now, on a desolate stretch of I-95, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station. My hands were shaking as I stepped out into the biting cold. I swiped my credit card, the platinum card linked to our joint account, the one I use for everything from groceries to business dinners, at the pump. Processing. The screen flashed. Then, abruptly, declined. Please see cashier. I frowned. That was impossible. The credit limit on that card was $50,000, and I'd paid the bill in full 3 days ago. I tried again. Declined. A cold knot formed in my stomach, heavier than the betrayal I'd just witnessed. I dug through my wallet and pulled out my personal debit card, the one linked to my checking account where my salary was deposited. I went inside the station. The clerk, a bored teenager with headphones around his neck, didn't even look up as I put a bottle of water and a pack of gum on the counter. I swiped the debit card. It's not going through, he mumbled, chewing his gum. Try it again, I said, my voice tight. There's money in there. He sighed and ran it again. Declined, ma'am. Insufficient funds or card blocked. You got cash? I stood there, frozen, under the harsh fluorescent lights. My banking app. I had to check my app. My clumsy fingers fumbled for my phone as I logged in. Access denied. User authentication failed. Please contact your branch. I tried the business account. Access denied. I tried the joint savings account. Access denied. Mark hadn't just kicked me out of my home. He had executed a financial kill switch. He had been planning this. You don't lock a co-owner out of business and personal accounts instantly unless you've laid the groundwork with the bank, falsely claiming fraud or changing administrative privileges days in advance. He wanted me destitute. He wanted me stranded in the middle of the night, with no resources, so that I would crawl back and sign whatever generous offer Carol had mentioned. I rummaged through my purse, past the useless plastic, to the small zipper pocket at the bottom. I found 3 crumpled $20 bills and a handful of change. $60-something. That was my net worth at this moment. I paid for $20 of gas and the water with cash. I got back in my car, shivering, not just from the cold, but from the terrifying awareness of my vulnerability. I couldn't go to a hotel. I had no credit card for a deposit. I couldn't go to my mother's. I couldn't go to Jessica's. I drove until I found a roadside motel with a flickering neon sign that read, "Vacancy." It was the kind of place where truckers sleep for a few hours. The kind of place where the sheets smell like stale smoke and regret. Pay in advance? The night manager said through bulletproof glass. $50 for the night. I handed him $50 of my remaining $60. He slid a key through the tray. Room 12. The room was freezing. The heater rattled and spit out air that smelled like burning dust. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, still in my expensive business suit, my coat pulled tightly around me. I looked at my phone. The screen was lit up with notifications. No apologies. No. Please come back. 118 missed calls. Most were from a number I recognized, Mark's personal lawyer, a shark named Richard Valentine. And then the emails started to arrive. Subject: Marital dissolution agreement. Subject: Urgent, non-disclosure agreement required. Subject: Notice of termination, Sterling Fuentes Realty. I opened the termination notice first. It was a PDF attached to an email from the head of HR. A woman I had hired. A woman I had mentored. Dear Miss Fuentes. It read. Effective immediately, your position as Chief Operating Officer is terminated for cause. Allegations of corporate espionage and gross negligence. I laughed. A harsh, raw sound in the empty room. Espionage? Negligence? I was the one who stayed until 3 a.m. auditing the books. I was the one who knew every zoning law in New York City. Mark didn't even know how to convert a PDF without asking for my help. And then a text message came through. It was from Jake. My thumb hovered over the screen, some small, foolish part of me hoping he'd snapped out of it, that he was sorry. Mom, don't make this harder. Dad says he'll cut off my tuition and trust fund if you fight the divorce. He's promised me the VP position next year if I stick with him. You always told me to be ambitious. I'm just doing what you taught me. Please understand. I dropped the phone on the bed as if it were burning. That was the final erasure. Mark hadn't just taken my money and my job. He had bought my son's soul. He had used the wealth I helped build to bribe my own child against me. I curled up on the filthy bedspread, my knees pulled to my chest. The tears finally came, hot and fast. I cried for the little boy I used to read bedtime stories to. I cried for the sister I had protected on the playground. I cried for the husband I had believed in when he was nothing but a smile in a cheap suit. But as the night wore on and the tears dried into a crusty salt on my cheeks, something else began to settle in my chest. It was cold and heavy, like a stone. They thought they had erased me. They thought by taking away the credit cards and the passwords, they had taken away my power. They forgot one thing. They forgot who built the castle they were sitting in. They forgot who designed the security systems, who drafted the contracts, and who knew where all the bodies were buried. Mark thought Sterling Fuentes Realty ran on his charm. He was about to learn that it ran on my brain. And while he might have stolen the keys to the front door, he had forgotten that the architect always leaves a back door. I stared at the water stain on the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. I wasn't Eleanor the wife anymore. I wasn't Eleanor the mother. I was Eleanor the architect. And I was about to bring the whole damn house down. Sleep was impossible in that motel room. The roar of the highway traffic was a constant hum, but it was the noise in my head that kept me awake. The sharp, jagged memories replaying on a loop. To understand why I was lying on a dirty mattress with $10 to my name, I had to go back. I had to look at the foundations of my life and realize they had been cracked from the very beginning. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the older of 2 daughters. My father died when I was 7, leaving my mother, Carol, to raise us alone. His death broke something in her. Or maybe it just revealed who she really was. She was a woman who needed to be adored, to be the center of attention. And she projected that need onto her daughters, or rather, onto one of them. Jessica was born beautiful, even as a baby. She had golden curls and big blue eyes that made strangers stop on the street. I was plain, brown hair, serious eyes, sturdy. I was the responsible one. Jessica was the princess. I remember the day I turned 18. I had just received my acceptance letter to the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania on a partial scholarship. It was my ticket out. I'd worked 3 part-time jobs through high school, tutoring, waitressing, shelving books at the library, to save for the rest of the tuition. I ran into the kitchen, waving the letter. Mom, I got in! Carol was at the table painting Jessica's nails. Jessica was 12 then, already demanding and petulant. That's nice, Eleanor, my mother said without looking up. But keep your voice down. Jessica has a headache. But Mom, it's Wharton. It's the business program. Carol sighed, finally looking at me. Her eyes weren't filled with pride. They were calculating. Eleanor, honey, we need to talk about that money you've saved. My college fund. Well, Jessica has been scouted. There's a modeling competition in Miami next month. It could be her big break. But the fees, the travel, the portfolio pictures, it's expensive. My stomach dropped. Mom, that's my tuition money. I earned it. You're so selfish, Eleanor. Jessica piped in, blowing on her wet nails. You don't want me to be famous. When I'm rich, I'll buy you a car, Eleanor. My mother said, her voice taking on that tone. The one that mixed guilt with a command. You're the strong one. You're the smart one. You can always find a way. You can work another year. Take night classes? But Jessica, she's delicate. This is her dream. You wouldn't want to crush your sister's dream, would you? Families sacrifice for each other. I gave them the money. Of course I did. I had been conditioned for 18 years to believe that my value lay only in what I could provide for them. I was the scapegoat, the workhorse, the fixer. Jessica was the golden child, the star, the one who deserved to shine. Jessica went to Miami. She didn't get signed. She spent the money on clothes and theme parks. I spent the next year working double shifts at a diner to earn the money back. I started college a year late, exhausted, but determined. That dynamic never changed. It just evolved. When I graduated at the top of my class, my mother didn't come to the ceremony because Jessica was having severe anxiety over a breakup with a 2-week boyfriend. I walked across the stage alone. When I got my first big promotion at a financial consulting firm, my mother said, "That's great, honey. Hey, can you lend Jessica $2,000? Her landlord is being a real jerk." I paid Jessica's rent. I paid for her car repairs. I paid for acting classes she never attended. I bought my mother a condo so she wouldn't have to worry about stairs. I thought I was buying their love. I thought if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, fixed enough problems, they would finally look at me the way they looked at Jessica. I thought one day my mother would look at my face and say, "I'm so proud of you, Eleanor. You're my joy." But I was never her joy. I was her utility bill. I was her safety net. And then I met Mark. He was charming, ambitious, and he seemed to see me. He told me I was brilliant. He told me I was beautiful. I didn't realize then that he had the same calculating look in his eyes as my mother. He didn't see a soulmate. He saw a host. He saw a woman trained to give everything and ask for nothing in return. He fit perfectly into the empty space in my heart that my mother and sister had hollowed out. I married him, thinking I was building a new family, a better one. In my motel room, the revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't escaped my family dynamic by marrying Mark. I had recreated it. Mark was the golden child, demanding adoration and resources. I was still the scapegoat, toiling in the shadows to keep the lights on. And Jessica? Jessica was just the inevitable conclusion. The two parasites in my life had finally found each other. You're the strong one, Eleanor. My mother's voice echoed in my memory. Well, she was right about one thing. I was strong. Strong enough to carry them for 40 years. And now? God help them. I was strong enough to drop them. I sat up on the bed, the metal springs creaking. I wasn't going to cry anymore. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. They wanted the delicate Jessica. They wanted the dreamer Mark. Fine, they could have each other, but they couldn't have my money. They couldn't have my company. I reached for my laptop bag. It was time to stop being the self-sacrificing daughter. It was time to be the CEO who liquidates toxic assets. Main story part 3, The Counterattack, The morning sun filtered through the grimy motel room curtains, casting long, dusty shadows on the floor. I opened my laptop. Thankfully, I had a portable Wi-Fi hotspot in my bag, a habit from years of business travel. Mark couldn't cut off a device he didn't know existed. I didn't try the bank accounts yet. I knew those doors were sealed shut. Instead, I opened a file called SF Archive 1. To understand how I was going to destroy Mark, you have to understand how I built him. I met Mark 22 years ago at a real estate networking event in Midtown Manhattan. He was 29, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, holding a glass of cheap wine, and holding court with a group of investors. He was electric. He had a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo. A laugh that made you feel like the funniest person in the world. I was 25, a junior analyst at one of the big consulting firms. Standing in a corner, clutching my binder of market research, I watched him work the room. He was charismatic, yes, but I could hear what he was saying. He was slinging buzzwords, making promises about returns that were mathematically impossible. He cornered me by the buffet. "You look like you're analyzing the structural integrity of the shrimp skewers," he joked. "No," I smiled. "I'm analyzing your pitch to those investors. You're promising a 15% ROI on a property in a declining district. You're going to lose them their money." He blinked, surprised. Then he laughed. "Okay, you got me. I'm a big-picture guy, not a numbers guy. I need someone who understands the boring stuff." "The boring stuff is what keeps you out of prison," I said dryly. He was smitten, or at least smitten with what I could do for him. Within 6 months, we were married. Within a year, we founded Sterling Fuentes Realty. The division of labor was set immediately. Mark was the face. He was the CEO. He took the client meetings, played golf with developers, and gave interviews to the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. He loved the spotlight, loved the title. I was the architect. I was the COO, but really, I was everything else. I found the properties, negotiated the loans, managed the contractors, battled the city for zoning permits, did the taxes, the payroll, the legal compliance. Our first big project was a disaster in the making. Mark had bought a derelict warehouse in the Bronx, convinced it would be the next big loft conversion. He overpaid by $500,000. The contractor he hired ran off with the deposit. We were on the brink of bankruptcy before we had even sold a single unit. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, pregnant with Jake, staring at the red numbers in the ledger. Mark was pacing, panicked, sweating through his shirt. "We're finished, Eleanor," he cried. "My reputation is ruined. They're going to sue me." "Sit down," I ordered. I took my grandmother's jewelry, the one inheritance I'd received, safe from my mother and Jessica, and sold it. I liquidated my 401k. I renegotiated the terms with the bank, presenting a business plan so detailed, so bulletproof, that the branch manager said it was the best he'd ever seen. I fired Mark's buddy, who was acting as project manager, and took over construction oversight myself, walking through active building sites with a hard hat and a 6-month baby bump. We finished the project. We sold out in 3 weeks. Mark was hailed as a visionary in the business press. The headline read, "Mark Sterling, the new king of lofts." He brought the magazine home, beaming. "Look at this, baby! We did it!" He didn't mention me in the interview once. When I gently pointed it out, he kissed my forehead. "Sweetheart, you know how the media is. They like a single narrative. Besides, you hate the spotlight. You're my secret weapon. The power behind the throne." I accepted it. I told myself it was for the family. I told myself that as long as the company succeeded, it didn't matter whose face was on the cover. I was a fool. For 20 years, I built the stage, set the lights, and wrote the script. Mark just walked out and took the applause. And the company grew. We expanded into commercial properties, luxury condos, mixed-use developments. We were worth hundreds of millions. But the company structure? That was my masterpiece. Mark was lazy with details. He hated reading contracts. He hated passwords. "You handle it, Eleanor," was his favorite phrase. So, I set up the digital infrastructure. I created the intricate web of LLCs to limit liability. I set up the automated bank transfers. And because Mark was paranoid about employees stealing from him, he insisted on a localized, highly encrypted internal server for our most sensitive financial data. He wanted a ghost access, a master admin login that could bypass all other protocols in case we ever got locked out or held hostage by the IT staff. "Only you and I will know the ghost access," he'd said. But Mark never bothered to memorize the complex 64-character string I generated. He wrote it on a post-it, kept it in his desk drawer for a week, and then threw it away, assuming I would always be there to type it in for him. He was right. I was always there, until yesterday. Now, sitting in the motel, I stared at the login screen for the Sterling Fuentes private server. The VPN tunnel was secure. Mark thought that by calling the bank and removing me as a signatory, he had cut me off. He thought by firing me through HR, he had revoked my access. He relied on the standard protocols. He relied on the front door. He forgot about the ghost access. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed the character string. It was a line from a Robert Frost poem mixed with the GPS coordinates of the first building we bought, and the date Jake lost his first tooth. Mark knew none of those things. Authentication in process. Access granted? Admin level. The screen flooded with data. The entire nervous system of Sterling Fuentes Realty was open before me. Emails, wire transfers, transaction logs, tax documents, private chat histories. I wasn't just looking at a company. I was looking at the crime scene of my marriage. I started downloading. I didn't want a few files. I wanted everything. Every email Mark had sent for the last 5 years. Every expense report, every wire transfer to the Cayman Islands or Switzerland. And that's when I saw it. A folder labeled Project J. It wasn't a construction project. The J stood for Jessica. I opened the folder, and the blood ran cold in my veins. This wasn't just an affair. This was grand-scale embezzlement. Dates, amounts, receipts. January 12th. $5,000 wire to Miller Consulting LLC. Jessica's maiden name. February 14th. $12,000 at Cartier. March 1st. $4,500 monthly rent for a luxury suite at the Plaza Hotel. He had been keeping Jessica like a courtesan on company money for 3 years. But it was even deeper. I saw wires to a shell corporation I didn't recognize, Orion Investments LLC. The signatory on Orion wasn't Mark. It was Jessica. And the assets being transferred to Orion weren't just cash. They were deeds. Mark was slowly transferring the titles of our most valuable, debt-free properties to a company owned by my sister. He was gutting Sterling Fuentes, preparing to leave me with the empty shell while he and Jessica walked away with the assets. I felt sick. This wasn't just replacing me as a wife. This was a grand heist. But as I scrolled through the documents, a cold smile touched my lips. Mark was a showman, not an architect. He didn't understand the paperwork he was signing. In his arrogance and Jessica's greed, they had made mistakes. Amateur, sloppy mistakes. They had forged my signature on the deed transfers. I could see it in the PDFs. A clumsy digital copy-paste of my signature from a different document. And on the Orion Investments operating agreement, Jessica had listed her permanent address. It was my address, the house I paid for. I had them. I had them dead to rights, but I couldn't strike yet. If I went to the police now, Mark would claim it was a clerical error. He'd pay a fine and bury me in litigation for years. He had money for expensive lawyers. I had $10. I needed to let them hang themselves. I needed them to feel secure. I needed them to think I was defeated, broke, and hiding in a hole somewhere. I closed the laptop. I had the blueprints for their destruction. Now I just needed to build the trap. The digital evidence of Project J burned in my mind, forcing me to remember exactly how Jessica had infiltrated my sanctuary. It started 5 years ago, a time when Sterling Fuentes was booming and my guard was down. Jessica had just gone through her third divorce. Her ex-husband, a decent mechanic named David, had left her because she refused to work and spent his paycheck on designer bags she couldn't afford. She showed up on my doorstep with 2 suitcases and a tearful story that would have won an Oscar. "He was abusive, Eleanor," she cried, throwing herself into my arms. I later learned abusive meant he had cut off her credit card. "I have nowhere to go. Mom said you would help me." Carol called me 10 minutes later. "Eleanor, you have that huge house with all those empty guest rooms. Let your sister stay for a few weeks. She just needs to get back on her feet." Family helps family. I agreed. I always agreed. 1 week turned into 6 months. Jessica spent her days by my pool, drinking my wine, and criticizing my landscapers. Mark, at the time, seemed annoyed by her presence. "She's a freeloader, Eleanor," he'd complain. "She treats our house like a hotel." I defended her. "She's grieving, Mark. Give her time." Then came the request. "I need a job," Jessica announced one night at dinner. "I'm bored. I want to work for you guys." I nearly choked. "Jessica, we run a commercial real estate firm. It's high pressure. What skills do you have for this?" "I'm good with people," she insisted. "I can be, client relations. I can plan the parties. I can schmooze the investors. You guys are so serious. You need someone fun." "No," I said. It was one of the few times I set a boundary. But Carol intervened. She drove 40 minutes to have coffee with me. "Eleanor, this is Jessica's chance to be responsible. If you don't give her a job, she'll spiral. Do you want her living on your couch forever? Give her a salary. Let her move out. Mark thinks it's a good idea." "Mark does?" "I spoke with him," Carol said smoothly. "He thinks Jessica could help soften the company's image. You can be a little intense, honey." I confronted Mark. "You want to hire Jessica?" Mark shrugged, adjusting his tie. "Your mother's right. We need someone to handle the social stuff, the galas, the charity events. You hate that stuff. Let her do it. Pay her an assistant's salary. Get her out of the house. We all win." I caved. I created a position, Director of Special Events. At first, it seemed to work. Jessica moved into an apartment I subsidized and planned the company Christmas party. It was lavish, over budget, but a success. Then the subtle shifts began. Jessica started coming to the office every day, dressed not in business attire, but in body-hugging dresses that were just on the edge of inappropriate. She would spend hours in Mark's office discussing event logistics. I'd walk by and hear them laughing. Whenever I entered the room, they would fall silent. "What's so funny?" I'd ask, feeling a prickle of unease. "Oh, just a joke about a client," Jessica would say, smiling that saccharine smile. "You wouldn't get it, Eleanor. It's an inside thing." She started joining us for business lunches. Then she started replacing me at them. "Eleanor, you stay and finish the quarterly projections," Mark would say. "Jessica and I will take the developers to the steakhouse. You hate small talk." And I did hate small talk. I loved the work, so I let them go. I would stay in the office, eating a salad at my desk, crunching the numbers, making sure our profit margins were healthy, while my husband and sister were drinking dry martinis and laughing at my expense. I noticed changes in Mark. He started dressing younger. He bought a Porsche she didn't need. He started staying out late for networking. When I voiced my concern, Carol gaslit me into oblivion. "You're being paranoid, Eleanor," she scolded. "You should be glad Mark and Jessica get along. Most men hate their sisters-in-law. It's a blessing. Don't ruin it with your jealousy. It's unbecoming." Jealousy. She made me feel like a crazy, insecure harpy. Now, looking at the Project J folder on my laptop, I saw the reality. The networking dinners were dates. The business trips to Miami were vacations. And the consulting fees paid to Jessica were actually her allowance for being his mistress. The snake hadn't just slithered into the grass. I had opened the door, invited it in, and given it warm milk. And the worst part? My mother had held the door open. Carol had brokered this. She had pushed Jessica toward Mark, knowing exactly what Jessica was capable of. She wanted Jessica to have the life I had built because, in her twisted mind, Jessica deserved the kingdom. And I was just a builder, meant to put it up and walk away. I slammed my hand down on the cheap motel desk. The pain grounded me. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play the fun, irresponsible game? Let's see how much fun it is when the architect pulls out the load-bearing wall." I spent the next 6 hours in a forensic accounting trance. The ghost access gave me entry to everything, but I had to be careful. If I made any changes, if I altered any files, the system logs might alert the IT director, a man named Steven, who used to be loyal to me, but now undoubtedly answered to Mark. So I became a ghost. I copied, downloaded, screenshotted, and traced the flow of money. It was worse than I thought. Sterling Fuentes was being bled dry to fund their lifestyle, and the transfers to Jessica's shell company. Mark had stopped paying vendors. We were 3 months behind on payments to the construction crews for the new skyscraper in the financial district. We were in default on the interest for 2 major loans. Mark was robbing Peter to pay Jessica. The company, my life's work, was a house of cards. If the creditors found out, we'd be insolvent in 30 days. But then I found something that made me sit bolt upright. It was an email chain between Mark and a private investigator at Valentine Investigations. The date was from 2 years ago. Subject: Surveillance target Eleanor Fuentes. Mark. I need dirt. Anything. Infidelity, substance abuse, mental instability. I need grounds to void the prenup. Valentine. Mr. Sterling, we've tailed her for 6 months. She goes to work. She goes to the grocery store. She goes to her mother's. She works late. There's no dirt. The woman's a saint. Mark. Dig deeper or make something up. I can't afford to give her half. My breath hitched. 2 years. He had been planning to get rid of me for 2 years, but couldn't find a way to do it without losing money. And then a more recent email. Dated 1 week ago. Mark. Forget the dirt. We're going with a mental breakdown angle. Her family will testify. Her mother and sister are on board. We'll claim she's overworked, paranoid, unfit to lead. We'll force a no-confidence vote at the board. Once she's out, we trigger the buyout clause at the lowest valuation. Carol. I can testify she has been erratic lately. Very emotional. I'm worried about her, Mark. We have to do what's best for the company. I stared at the screen, tears of rage blurring my vision. My mother, my own mother, was conspiring to have me declared mentally unstable so her golden child could steal my husband and my money. It was Shakespearean. I'll show you erratic, I seethed. I dug deeper. I needed leverage. The fraud evidence was good, but it would take time to prove in court. I needed something immediate, something that would terrify Mark. I found it in the tax filings. Last year, to secure a massive loan from a private equity firm, Mark had inflated the occupancy rates on our commercial properties. He had forged lease agreements. He had physically forged the signatures of tenants that didn't exist. This wasn't just civil fraud. This was bank fraud. This was a federal crime with prison time. And the loan documents were signed by Mark Sterling, CEO. My signature wasn't on them. I had been out of town for my aunt's funeral that week, a funeral Jessica skipped, and Mark had said he'd handle the paperwork. He had signed his own death warrant and didn't even know it. I copied the loan documents. I copied the fake leases. I created a dossier that was a nuclear bomb. I glanced at the clock. It was 2 p.m. I had been working nonstop for 12 hours. I was hungry, unwashed, and running on pure adrenaline. I needed a burner phone. I couldn't use my cell. They were probably tracking it or pulling the records. I went to a convenience store across the street, buying a cheap prepaid phone with cash. Back in the room, I sat on the bed and stared at the new phone. Who could I call? My friends? Most were couple friends shared with Mark. They'd likely side with charming Mark. Or stay neutral. My family? Obviously not. My employees? Too risky. I needed someone powerful, someone who hated Mark, someone with the resources to wage a war. A man's name popped into my head, Arthur Vance. Arthur was a billionaire real estate magnate in New York. Old money, ruthless, but principled. 3 years ago, Mark had outbid Arthur for a prime piece of land in the Hudson Yards development. Mark had won by bribing a city councilman, Franklin Miller, to rezone the land, a move I had vehemently opposed, but which Mark did behind my back. Arthur had suspected foul play. He had publicly called Mark a climber in a cheap suit. Mark had laughed it off, but Arthur had never forgotten. If I went to Arthur Vance with proof of Mark's fraud, specifically the fraud that screwed Arthur out of that deal, it was a long shot. Arthur might just laugh in my face. He might throw me out. But he was the only person in New York with enough power to shield me from Mark's legal team. I dialed the number for Vance Enterprises. I knew it by heart. I'd looked at it enough times when we were rivals. Vance Enterprises, Chairman's office. A crisp voice answered. I need to speak with Mr. Vance. Immediately. Mr. Vance is in meetings. May I ask what this is regarding? Tell him it's Eleanor Fuentes. Tell him I know how Mark Sterling got the rezoning for the Hudson Yards plot, and tell him I have the emails. There was a pause. 1 moment, please. 30 seconds later, a deep, gravelly voice came on the line. Miss Fuentes, to what do I owe the pleasure? Did your husband send you over to gloat? My husband just fired me, emptied my bank accounts, and moved his mistress into my house, I said, my voice steady. I'm not here to gloat, Mr. Vance. I'm here to burn him to the ground, and I thought perhaps you'd like to bring the marshmallows. Silence. Then a low chuckle. I'm listening. Before I went to meet Arthur Vance, there was one more wound I had to cauterize. One file I had been avoiding in the Sterling Fuentes database. Jake's trust fund. Jake was my weak spot, my Achilles heel. I had shielded him from Mark's narcissism his entire life. When Mark forgot Jake's birthday, I bought the gift and signed Mark's name. When Mark missed Jake's soccer games, I told Jake that Dad was working hard for our future. I had raised him to believe his father was a hero, covering up the reality that his father was a negligent egomaniac. I realized now that had been my greatest mistake. I had protected Jake from the truth, and in doing so, I had allowed Mark to buy his loyalty with lies. I opened the trust fund documents. Mark had recently amended the terms. Originally, the fund was to be paid out at age 25, conditional on college graduation. The new terms, dated 2 weeks ago, immediate access to a $200,000 cash provision. Transfer of title for the 2023 Porsche 911. And the attached correspondence, Jake. Dad, Mom's going to flip if I drop out next semester. Mark. Mom's not going to be in charge much longer, Jakey. She treats you like a kid. I treat you like a man. You want the car? You want the cash? You just have to back me up when the time comes. You have to tell the lawyers Mom's been acting strange, that she's unstable. Jake. Well, she has been kind of stressed lately. Mark. Exactly. She's losing it. We have to protect the company. If you stick with me, I'm making you VP of Acquisitions next year. No degree needed. You can learn on the job, just like I did. Jake. VP? Seriously? Okay, I'm in. What do I have to do? I read the words, and my heart didn't just break. It atomized. Vice President of Acquisitions. Jake was failing intro to economics. He spent his weekends playing video games and sleeping until noon. He wasn't qualified to run a lemonade stand, let alone a department in a multimillion-dollar company. Mark was setting him up to fail, stroking his ego to use him as a pawn against me. And Jake, my sweet boy, had sold his mother out for a Porsche and a title he hadn't earned. I remembered the text he sent me last night. Dad says he'll cut off my tuition. He wasn't worried about tuition. He was worried about the easy money. I pulled up Jake's credit card statement, the one I paid. Liquor store, $400. Nightclub, $1,200. Online gambling site. Nightclub. Strip club. He was in a tailspin, and instead of parenting him, Mark was funding it to buy an ally. I picked up my burner phone. I hesitated. This was my son. But the boy who sat on that couch and told me to accept reality wasn't the boy I raised. He was his father's creation. If I continued to cushion his fall, I would lose him forever to Mark's world of corruption and shallowness. The only way to save him, to truly save him, was to let him crash. I typed a text message. I didn't send it yet. Just wrote it, staring at the cursor. Jake, I saw the emails. I saw the car. You chose the easy way. But the easy way is a trap. When your father is done using you, he will discard you just like he did me. I love you enough to let you learn this the hard way. Good luck, Mr. Vice President. I saved the draft, wiped my eyes. I navigated to the payroll system. I removed Jake from the intern payroll he'd been on for 3 years, despite never setting foot in the office. I couldn't touch the trust fund. Mark controlled that now. But I could touch the health insurance. Jake was on my policy, the policy I personally paid for. Jake Sterling. Reason, no longer a full-time student. It was petty. It was small. But it was the first time in 21 years I wasn't fixing something for him. My phone buzzed. It was the address for the meeting with Arthur Vance. 1 hour. The Union League Club library room. Come alone. I closed the laptop. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I tried to smooth my hair. My suit was rumpled, but I shook it out. I put on a layer of lipstick, my armor. I looked in the mirror. The woman looking back at me looked tired, yes, but she looked dangerous. She looked like a mother who had lost her cubs and had nothing left to lose. You want unstable, Mark? I said to my reflection. I'm about to show you an earthquake. Main story part 4, The Showdown, ****. I walked into the Union League Club in the same rumpled suit I'd fled my house in, carrying a laptop bag that contained enough evidence to send my husband to Rikers Island. The doorman eyed me skeptically. This place smelled of old money, cigars, and mahogany, a world Arthur Vance ruled. I found him in the library room, sitting in a leather wingback chair, reading the Financial Times. He was 65, with silver hair and eyes like polished flint. He didn't stand as I approached. Miss Fuentes, he said, folding his paper. You look terrible. I feel terrible, I admitted, sinking into the chair opposite him. But my brain is working perfectly. You mentioned the Hudson Yards deal, Arthur said, getting straight to the point. You said you had proof. I opened my laptop. I wasted no time on pleasantries. I pulled up the dossier I had compiled in the motel room. I turned the screen toward him. 3 years ago, Mark outbid you for the Hudson Yards plot. You suspected he bribed City Councilman Franklin Miller. You were right. Arthur leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Here is the wire transfer, I said, pointing at the screen. $50,000 to a shell company called Miller Management. And here are the emails between Mark and Miller discussing the expedited rezoning fee. Mark was sloppy. He used his personal email for the initial contact. Arthur scanned the documents. His expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to grow colder. Why are you showing me this now? You were the COO. You profited from this deal. I didn't know, I said, my voice firm. Mark kept a second set of books. I found them last night after he threw me out of my house, froze my accounts, and moved my sister into my bed. Arthur looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. his sister. And my mother is cheering them on, I added, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. It's a regular family reunion, and I'm the only one not invited. I took a breath. Mr. Vance, I didn't come here to gossip. I came here to make a deal. Mark is trying to destroy me. He's forged my signature on fraudulent loans. He's embezzling from the company. He's going to leave Sterling Fuentes as a smoking crater. And you want me to save you? Arthur asked, raising an eyebrow. No, I countered. I want you to help me bury him, and in return I will give you the Hudson Yards property. Arthur paused. Go on. Mark is overleveraged. He's cash poor. He's about to default on the construction loans. If you step in now as a white knight investor, offering a bridge loan to save the project, he'll take it. He's desperate. And in the loan agreement, we include a collateral clause. If he defaults, which he will, because I know the real numbers, you take the assets. Specifically, the Hudson Yards deed. Arthur stared at me for a long moment. The silence stretched, thick and tense. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. You're a vindictive woman, aren't you? Arthur said softly. I'm efficient, I corrected. Mark thinks I'm a scorned wife who's going to cry in a corner. He doesn't realize I'm the one who wrote his business plan. Arthur closed my laptop and pushed it back toward me. I like you, Eleanor. You have nerve. I always found Mark to be a peacock. All feathers, no flight. But you're a hawk. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my personal counsel. He's the best litigator in New York. He'll represent you in the divorce pro bono. Consider it an investment in our new partnership. Thank you, I whispered, relief flooding through me. And Eleanor, Arthur added, his eyes hard. Don't disappoint me. If we do this, we destroy him utterly. No mercy. No taking him back when he cries. He won't be crying, I said, thinking of Mark's smirk as he took my ring. He'll be screaming. Arthur nodded. Good. Now let's get you a hotel room that doesn't charge by the hour. You can't plan a war if you haven't slept. That night, I slept in a suite at the Plaza Hotel, paid for by Vance Enterprises. I took a long bath, scrubbing the grime of the motel from my skin. As I lay between the clean, crisp sheets, I felt a profound shift inside me. For 20 years, I had been the fixer. I had smoothed over Mark's mistakes, cleaned up his messes, made him look good. I had been the invisible glue, holding it all together. Now, I was going to be the solvent. I was going to dissolve everything he thought he owned. I picked up my burner phone and sent Arthur a one-word text. Ready. 3 days later, the trap was set. Arthur's lawyer, a terrifyingly calm man named David Qua, had drafted the divorce settlement. It was a masterpiece of legal misdirection. On the surface, it looked like a complete surrender. The proposal: Mark gets the family home. Mark gets full ownership of Sterling Fuentes Realty. Eleanor receives a one-time lump sum of $500,000, a fraction of what I was owed. Eleanor relinquishes all claims to future alimony. It looked like I was giving up. It looked like I was broken, desperate for cash, and just wanted to run away. Mark would love it. It fed his ego perfectly. But buried deep in the 60-page document, in Section 14, subsection C, paragraph 4, was the poison pill clause. In the event that either party to this agreement is found to have engaged in undisclosed criminal activity, fraud, or embezzlement during the marriage, or is convicted of a felony within 24 months of signing, this agreement in its entirety shall become null and void. In such an event, all assets, including 100% of company shares and real estate holdings, shall revert to the non-offending party as punitive damages. Mark never read the fine print. He paid lawyers to do that, but his lawyer, Richard Valentine, was lazy. I knew this because I used to pay his invoices. Valentine would skim contracts, looking for the big numbers, the settlement, the alimony. He wouldn't be looking for a specific reversion clause buried in boilerplate liability language. I met Mark and his lawyer at Valentine's office. I wore no makeup, just an old sweater. I kept my head down, staring at the floor. I needed to sell the picture of the defeated woman. Mark strode in like he owned the world. He was wearing a new Italian suit and smelled of expensive cologne, probably a gift from Jessica. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Mark sneered as he sat down. "I hope you're ready to sign, Eleanor. Jessica and I have wedding invitations to order." "Just give me the check," I said, my voice quavering. "I just want to be gone, Mark. I can't fight you anymore." Mark laughed, looking at Valentine. "See? Told you she'd fold. She doesn't have the stomach for this." Valentine slid the papers across the table. "Standard agreement, Eleanor. You walk away with $500,000 and a clean slate. Just sign here, here, and here." I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking, part acting, part pure adrenaline. "And Jake?" I asked softly. "Jake's staying with me," Mark said, leaning back in his chair. "He's my VP now. We're going to build an empire together without your constant nagging." I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I swallowed it. "Okay. Just take care of him. Sign the damn papers, Eleanor." I put my name on the line that seemingly signed away 20 years of my hard work. Then Mark signed. He did it with a flourish. A big, arrogant M. "Done," Valentine said, closing the folder. "The check will be wired to your account tomorrow." Mark stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked down at me with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "You know, Eleanor, you should thank me. You were always too uptight for this life. Go live on a farm or something. Find yourself a nice librarian." "Goodbye, Mark," I whispered as he walked toward the elevator. I could hear Mark laughing with Valentine. That was easier than I thought. She didn't even ask for the beach house. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his laughter. I leaned against the metal wall and let out a long breath. He had signed. The poison pill was active. Now all I had to do was prove the crime, and I already had the proof. I just needed the right stage to present it. And what better stage than a wedding? Mark and Jessica had announced the date. It was in 3 weeks. A whirlwind romance, they called it. They wanted to be legitimized before the spring gala season. 3 weeks. That was my deadline. I left the building and got into Arthur's waiting town car. "He signed?" Arthur asked from the back seat. "He signed," I said, a genuine smile finally breaking through. "He thinks he bought my silence for $500,000. He just signed away his entire life." Arthur poured me a glass of sparkling water. "To the architect." "To the demolition," I replied. The next 3 weeks were an exercise in masochism. I had to remain invisible while Mark and Jessica flaunted their victory all over New York. I rented a small, discreet apartment on the Upper West Side using my maiden name. I spent my days with Arthur's forensic accountants, building the case. We were turning the raw data I'd stolen into a legal sledgehammer. Every night, I tortured myself by checking social media. Jessica's Instagram was a vomit of luxury. A picture of a new Mercedes convertible. "My future hubby is spoiling me. #blessed #new beginnings." A picture of my dining room redecorated with tacky gold wallpaper. "Out with the old, in with the glam. Finally making this house a home." That one hurt. Seeing her erase my touch from the home I built. But the most painful post came from my mother. Carol posted a picture of the 3 of them, Mark, Jessica, and her, toasting with champagne flutes at a tasting menu dinner. Caption: "Finally, a family that knows how to enjoy life. So proud of my beautiful daughter, Jessica, and my wonderful son-in-law, Mark. True love always wins. True love." She had sold out her eldest daughter for a seat at a fancy table. And Jake. Jake was silent on social media, but I saw the credit card alerts from the secondary accounts I still monitored, the ones Mark hadn't found yet. Liquor Depot, $400. Maris Nightclub, $1,200. Bail bonds, $500. My son was in a freefall. Mark wasn't parenting him. He was enabling him. I wanted to rush in and save him, but Arthur stopped me. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Eleanor. Arthur told me gently. He chose his side. Let him see what that side is really like when the lights go out. I knew he was right, but it felt like cutting off a limb. Meanwhile, the company was rotting from the inside. My moles, Sarah in accounting and James in project management, gave me daily updates. Mark hasn't been in the office past 2 p.m. in weeks, Sarah texted. He's letting Jessica plan a company rebrand. She wants to change the logo to pink and gold. Pink and gold, Eleanor, for a commercial real estate firm. Contractors are threatening to walk off the Hudson Yards site, James reported. Mark said the check is in the mail. It isn't. He used the construction money to pay for the wedding venue. Let it burn, I told them. Just document everything. Save every email where he tells you to delay payments. The wedding was to be at the Plaza Hotel, in the Grand Ballroom. It was the most expensive venue in the city. Jessica had invited 300 people, investors, politicians, local celebrities. They wanted to cement their status as New York's new power couple. They wanted an audience. Good, I thought, looking at the invitations Sarah had smuggled to me. You want a show? I'll give you a show. 2 days before the wedding, I received one final piece of leverage. It came from an unexpected source. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Eleanor. It's David. David, Jessica's ex-husband, the mechanic she had bled dry. David, I said, shocked. How are you? I'm okay. Look, I heard about what happened. What they did to you. It's disgusting. It is, I agreed. I have something, David said, his voice low. When Jessica left me, she left a box of papers in the garage. I was going to burn them, but I went through them last night. Eleanor, did you know she had credit cards in your name from 3 years ago? The blood froze in my veins. What? She opened them when she was staying with you. She was intercepting the mail. She maxed them out, then hid the statements. But I found the letters from the collection agencies. And I found a letter from Mark. From Mark? Yeah. He paid off one of the cards. The letter says, I've covered this one, Jay, but you have to be more careful. If Eleanor sees this on her credit report, we're both dead. Stick to the plan. 2 more years and we take it all. 2 more years. The timeline fit perfectly. Mark had been conspiring with my sister to steal my identity and my money while I was feeding her and giving her a job. David, I said, my voice shaking. Can you get me that box? I'm on my way, he said. When David handed me that box, I felt the final lock click into place. This wasn't just fraud. It was a predatory, calculated, evil conspiracy. I looked at the handwritten letter from Mark. 2 more years and we take it all. I locked the letter in my safe. Thank you, David, I said. Give him hell, Eleanor, he said with a grim smile. Oh, I plan to, I replied. I plan to give them the whole damn inferno. The day before the wedding, I did something dangerous. I went to see Jake. I knew I shouldn't. Arthur advised against it, but I was a mother first and a vengeful ex-wife second. I needed to give him one last chance to get off the sinking ship. I waited outside his new penthouse apartment, the one Mark had bought with company funds. At 11 a.m., Jake stumbled out, looking hungover. He wore designer sunglasses and a sweatshirt that cost more than my first car. Jake! I called. He jumped, spinning around. When he saw me, his face hardened. Mom, what are you doing here? Are you stalking me now? I'm not stalking you. I'm trying to save you. I don't need saving. He spat, walking toward his Porsche. I'm doing great. Dad just put me in charge of the Southern portfolio. Jake, listen to me, I said, stepping in his path. Your father is lying to you. The company is bankrupt. He's stealing money to pay for this lifestyle. He's using you as a shield. When the feds come, and they are coming, your name is on the documents. Jake laughed. It was a hollow, brittle sound. You're just jealous. You're jealous because Dad's winning, and you're a nobody. You're living in some dump, right? Dad told me. I'm living in reality, I said, my voice urgent. Jake, please don't go to the wedding tomorrow. Just say you're sick. Go away with your friends. Just don't be there, standing next to him, when it happens. When what happens? He challenged. You're going to crash it, aren't you? You're going to make a scene. God, you're pathetic, Mom. Dad said you tried to ruin it. He called me pathetic. I felt the rage rise, but I pushed it down. Jake, look at me. I raised you. I know you. You are not this person. You are kind. You are smart. You are not a thief. I'm not a thief, he shouted, his face reddening. I'm a businessman, like Dad. Dad is a fraud. I yelled back. And Jessica is a parasite. And if you stand with them, you will go down with them. Jake glared at me. Then he pulled out his phone. I'm calling security. Get away from me. He got in his car, revving the engine aggressively. As he peeled out of the parking spot, he rolled down the window and yelled, Don't come tomorrow, Mom. Nobody wants you there. You're the past. I watched him drive away, my heart breaking all over again, but this time the brake was cleaner. I had tried. I had held out my hand. He had slapped it away. He was on his own now. I drove back to my apartment. Arthur was waiting for me with the final preparations. How did it go? He asked, though he clearly knew the answer from my face. He's gone, I said flatly. Completely brainwashed. Then he will learn the hard way, Arthur said. Are you ready for tomorrow? Yes, we have the access codes to the projector. Yes, the police are briefed. Yes, Inspector Miller is meeting us in the lobby at 8 p.m. Arthur handed me a garment bag. Then you'll need this. I unzipped the bag. Inside was a suit. Not a frantic, desperate ex-wife's dress. It was a sleek, tailored black tuxedo. Yves Saint Laurent. Powerful, elegant, severe. Put on your armor, Eleanor, Arthur said. You are not the victim. You are the executioner. I touched the fabric. It was cool and smooth. Thank you, Arthur. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow will be a long night. I didn't rest. I sat by the window, watching the city lights. I thought of Mark and Jessica, probably rehearsing their vows right now. Probably laughing about how they had gotten away with it all. 2 more years and we take it all. They wouldn't have 2 years. They wouldn't even have 2 days. Tomorrow, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling were going to have a very different kind of reception. Main story part 5, The Wedding Crashers. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and overcast. A perfect day in New York for a funeral. I spent the morning reviewing the presentation. We had it timed to the second. It would start just after the love story video montage Jessica had commissioned for $20,000. At 6 p.m., the guests began to arrive at the plaza. I watched the live feed from a camera Arthur had installed in the ballroom. He had a stake in the hotel. Getting access was trivial. It was nauseating. The room was draped in crystal and pink roses, thousands of them. There was an ice sculpture of Mark and Jessica intertwined. I saw my mother Carol, greeting guests. She wore a champagne-colored dress that was too young for her, beaming as if she'd won the lottery. Yes, isn't it wonderful? I heard her say to a confused-looking cousin. They're soulmates. Eleanor. Oh, poor Eleanor just couldn't handle Mark's success. She's taking some time away. I saw Mark. He looked nervous but triumphant. He was shaking hands, slapping backs, playing the part of the benevolent king. And Jessica. She entered in a custom Vera Wang gown, draped in diamonds. Diamonds my company paid for. She looked stunning. I had to admit it. Stunning and rotten. The ceremony began. I listened to them exchange vows. I promise to be your partner in all things, Mark said, looking deeply into Jessica's eyes. I promise to support your dreams and spend my life making you happy. Jessica cooed. I was sitting in the hotel suite upstairs, sipping a black coffee. Lies, I whispered. Every word is a lie. Are we ready? Arthur asked, checking his watch. The signal is live. The tech confirmed. The second you give the word, we hijack the feed. Not yet, I said. Wait for the toasts. Wait until everyone is seated and watching the screens. The reception began. The champagne flowed. Mark stood to give a speech. I want to thank everyone for being here. He boomed, holding Jessica's hand. This has been a long journey, a journey to find true happiness. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to find your real destiny. The crowd applauded politely, though I saw a few uncomfortable glances. Everyone knew the scandal. They just didn't care as long as the open bar was top shelf. And to my new wife, Jessica, Mark continued. You are my muse, my rock, my everything. My phone buzzed. It was the signal. No, I said. Down in the ballroom, the lights dimmed for the video montage. Sentimental music began to play. Pictures of Mark and Jessica on yachts, in Paris, on the beach flashed across the huge screens behind the head table. The crowd, Ed. I stood up and smoothed the jacket of my tuxedo. I walked out of the suite and toward the elevator. Showtime, Arthur said, walking beside me. Inside the elevator, I watched the numbers descend. 10, 9, 8. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating slow and heavy, like a war drum. The elevator doors opened on the lobby level. Inspector Miller and 2 uniformed officers were waiting. Miss Fuentes? The inspector asked. Yes. We have the warrant. We're ready when you are. Give me 5 minutes, I said. I want them to see it before you put the cuffs on. Understood. I walked toward the ballroom doors. The security guards Mark hired to keep me out stepped forward. Ma'am, this is a private event. Arthur Vance stepped out from behind me. And I own the building. Stand aside, or you'll be looking for work tomorrow. The guards hesitated, recognized Arthur, and immediately backed away. I pushed open the double doors. Inside, the music had just reached a crescendo. The video on the screen showed Mark and Jessica kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower. And then the screen flickered. The music cut out with a screech of feedback. The room fell silent. On the massive screens, the romantic picture dissolved. In its place appeared a stark spreadsheet. Red numbers. Then a document. A credit card statement. Name, Jessica Miller. Address, 124 Oak Street, Greenwich, Connecticut. My house. Diamond ring, Cartier, $25,000 paid by Sterling Fuentes' corporate account. A murmur went through the crowd. What is that? Jessica hissed, half rising. Mark, fix it. Cut the feed. Mark yelled at the AV booth. Turn it off. But the tech in the booth was our guy. He didn't turn it off. He turned up the volume. And then my pre-recorded voice boomed through the speakers. Hello, Mark. Hello, Jessica. You wanted a family affair? You wanted everyone to witness your union? Well, let's show them what this union is really built on. Every head swiveled, not to the screen, but to the back of the room. I stood there, a solitary figure in black, holding a small remote. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. 300 pairs of eyes turned in their chairs to stare at me. I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. The black tuxedo made me look like a shadow against a sea of pink flowers. Mark was frozen at the head table, his face drained of all color. Jessica clutched her napkin to her chest, her mouth agape. My mother, Carol, looked like she was about to have a heart attack. Eleanor, Mark whispered, the microphone picking up his shaky voice. What are you doing? I didn't stop until I reached the center of the dance floor, directly in front of the head table. I looked at them. The people who had been my world, now just small, frightened figures on a stage. I'm here to make a toast, I said, my voice projecting clearly without a mic. I held up the remote. I clicked it. The screen behind them changed again. This time it was the email chain between Mark and the private investigator. Mark, dig deeper or make something up. I can't afford to give her half. The crowd gasped. I saw investors, men Mark respected, men he needed, leaning in, whispering furiously. Turn it off! Mark screamed, lunging toward the DJ booth. Security! Get her out of here! Sit down, Mark! Arthur Vance's voice boomed from the entrance. Unless you want to add assault to your list of felonies. Mark froze. He saw Arthur. He saw the police officers waiting in the shadows of the exit. This is fake! Jessica shrieked, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. She's jealous! She hacked the system! She's crazy! I clicked the remote again. A new document appeared. The forged loan application for the Hudson Yards project, the one with my signature clumsily pasted on. Is forgery crazy, Jessica? I asked calmly. Is bank fraud crazy? Because those are federal charges. And guess whose name is on the shell companies receiving the stolen funds? I clicked again. Orion Investments. Owner, Jessica Miller. I pointed at her. You're not just a mistress. You're a mule. Mark used you to launder $3 million. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you that when the IRS comes looking, they're coming for your signature? Jessica looked at Mark, her eyes wide with horror. Mark, you said it was tax optimization. You said it was legal. Shut up, Jessica. Mark hissed. Oh, don't stop him, I said, smiling coldly. Let him explain. Let him explain to our mother what he calls her. Click. The email appeared. Subject, the old woman. Mark, just cut Carol another check from the J Fund. The old woman is greedy. As long as we pay for her condo, she'll keep Eleanor in the dark. She'd sell out her own daughter for a renovation budget. Carol made a sound that was half wail, half choke. She stood up, her hands shaking so badly she knocked over her champagne glass. Mark, she gasped. You called me that? After everything I did for you? I took your side. I betrayed my own daughter for you. And what did it get you, Mom? I said, looking at her with pity. A seat at a wedding that's about to become a crime scene. Mark looked around the room, his eyes wild. He saw his empire crumbling in real time. He saw investors getting up to leave. He saw waiters stopping to stare. He saw the end. You signed the agreement, he yelled at me, desperate. You signed it. You gave up everything. You can't touch the company. Section 14, I said simply. The poison pill. You committed a felony. The agreement is void, and everything, the house, the company, the assets, reverts to me. Mark's knees gave out. He collapsed into his chair. And Jake, I said, turning my gaze to my son, who sat at the end of the table, pale as a ghost. Jake looked at me, terrified. He looked at the screen where his own text messages were now displayed. VP, seriously? Okay, I'm in. You wanted to be a businessman, Jake? I said softly. Well, here's your first lesson, vet your partners. I clicked the remote one last time. A video played. It was surveillance footage from the company parking garage. It showed Mark arguing with Jessica 2 days earlier. Mark on video. Once we get the Vance money, we ditch the kid. Jake's a liability. We'll leave him with the tax debt and move to Monaco. He's too stupid to figure it out. The room was deathly quiet. Jake stood up slowly. He stared at his father. The hero worship in his eyes was gone, replaced by a devastating understanding. Dad, Jake whispered. You were going to abandon me? Mark stammered. Jakey, that wasn't. I was just stressed. It's out of context. You called me stupid, Jake said, his voice breaking. You said I was a liability. Jake, sit down, Mark ordered, trying to regain control. Don't listen to her. Jake didn't sit down. He picked up his champagne glass and threw it in Mark's face. I hate you, Jake screamed. I hate you! Chaos erupted. Carol was sobbing. Jessica was hyperventilating. Mark was wiping champagne from his face, looking like a drowned rat. I lowered the remote. The presentation was over. I nodded to Inspector Miller. The police entered the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. Mark Sterling, the inspector announced. You are under arrest for bank fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Jessica Miller, you are under arrest for conspiracy and money laundering. No! Jessica shrieked as an officer grabbed her wrists. I didn't know. I'm just his fiancée. He made me do it. Tell it to the judge, the officer said, clicking the cuffs shut. Mark didn't scream. He just stared at me. As they cuffed him, he locked eyes with me. You ruined everything, he spat. You bitter, vengeful bitch. I walked up to him. I stood so close I could smell his fear. I didn't ruin anything, Mark, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. I just turned on the lights. And you? You're just a cockroach that got caught. They dragged them away. The wedding guests stood in stunned silence. The only sound was Carol's weeping. I looked at the head table one last time. The cake was untouched. The flowers were perfect. The illusion was shattered. I turned to Arthur Vance. I believe I'm done here. Brilliant, Arthur said, offering me his arm. Absolutely brilliant. As we walked out, I didn't look back at my crying mother or my devastated son. Not yet. They had made their beds. Tonight they had to lie in them. Ending. The architect rises. The days after the wedding were a media circus. The New York Post ran the story on the front page. Bridal doom. Real estate mogul arrested at altar. I gave no interviews. I let the evidence speak for itself. I moved back into my house 3 days later. The police had cleared it as a crime scene. It was strange walking back into the rooms I had designed. Jessica's things were everywhere: tacky clothes, cheap magazines, half-empty wine bottles. I hired a cleaning crew. Throw it all out, I told them. Anything that isn't mine. Burn the sheets. Replace the mattresses. I wanted to scrub her DNA from my life. Mark was denied bail. The judge deemed him a flight risk because of the Monaco plan on video. He was at Rikers Island, trading his Italian suits for an orange jumpsuit. Jessica made bail, paid for by my mother, who had liquidated her retirement savings to get her baby out. But Jessica wasn't free. She was facing 5 to 10 years. Her face was all over the internet as the jail-bound gold digger. A week later, I walked into the offices of Sterling Fuentes, now solely mine. The employees greeted me with a mixture of fear and relief. We're rebranding, I announced at the first all-hands meeting. Sterling Fuentes is dead. Welcome to Phoenix Realty. They applauded. They knew who signed the paychecks now. Another week later, my mother came to see me. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes red. She stood on my porch, shivering. Eleanor, she said, her voice trembling. Carol, I said, blocking the doorway. I couldn't call her. Mom, can I come in? It's so cold. You can say what you have to say from there. She flinched. Eleanor, please be reasonable. Jessica is terrified. She's just a girl. She didn't know what she was doing. Mark manipulated her. Jessica is 40 years old, I said coldly. She knew she was sleeping with my husband. She knew she was spending my money. She signed the papers. She's your sister, Carol wailed. You can't let her go to prison. You have to drop the charges. Tell the DA it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a felony. If you do this, Carol seethed, her grief turning to familiar venom. You are no daughter of mine. You are destroying this family. I laughed. It was a light, free sound. Carol, you destroyed this family 20 years ago when you decided Jessica was the princess and I was the servant. You haven't come here to apologize. You've come here to ask me to fix it again. You want me to be the scapegoat one last time so Jessica can walk free. She isn't delicate. She's a criminal. And you're an accomplice. I saw the checks Mark wrote you. Consulting fees. You accepted money to help them manipulate me. Carol went white. I'm not pressing charges against you, Carol, I said. Not because I love you, but because I don't want the shame of seeing my mother in a mugshot. But you are dead to me. Don't call me. Don't come here. If you need money, ask Jessica. Oh, wait. She's broke. I closed the door in her face. I watched on the security camera as she stood there, pounding on the door, screaming my name. Then her shoulders slumped. She walked away. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But it was the pain of pulling out a splinter. Sharp, then relief. Then there was Jake. He hadn't called, hadn't come by. I knew he was sleeping on a friend's couch because the authorities had seized the penthouse and the Porsche. I waited. I knew he had to come to me on his own terms. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my office. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight. He was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt. No designer sunglasses, no attitude. Mom? He asked from the doorway. I looked up from my desk. Hello, Jake. He came in and sat in the chair opposite me. He stared at his hands. I'm sorry, he whispered. I was stupid. He made me feel important. He told me I was better than college. He told me you were holding me back. And you believed him because it was easier than working. I said, gentle but firm. Yeah, he admitted, tears dripping onto his jeans. I saw the video. He called me a liability. He was going to abandon me. He looked up, a raw plea in his eyes. I have nothing, Mom. They took the car. I have no money. I need help. I looked at my son. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to write him a check and fix everything. But I was the architect now. And you don't build a strong structure on a cracked foundation. I love you, Jake, I said. But I am not giving you any money. He looked up, terrified. But where will I live? I don't know. That's for you to figure out. Mom, please. Here's the deal, I said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. This is a student loan application, and this is a job application for the mailroom at Phoenix Realty. Minimum wage. You start at the bottom. You finish your degree at night. The mailroom? He asked, shocked. Take it or leave it. If you want to be a man, Jake, you earn it. He looked at the papers. He looked at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. Slowly, he reached out and picked up the pen. Okay, he said, his voice shaking. I'll take the job. Good, I said. Report to Sarah in HR. She'll get you an ID badge. Don't be late. He stood up. He looked at me. He really looked at me for the first time in years. You're scary, Mom, he said, a hint of awe in his voice. I know, I smiled. Now get to work. The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark Sterling pleaded guilty to avoid a 20-year sentence. He got 8 years in federal prison plus restitution. He looked gray and defeated in the courtroom. He didn't look at me once. Jessica took a plea deal, 3 years in prison for fraud. She sobbed when the gavel fell, looking at Carol in the gallery, screaming, Mom, do something! But Carol could do nothing. Carol was living in a studio apartment, subsisting on Social Security, having lost her allowance and her pride. I sat in the back row in my black suit. I watched justice be done. I didn't feel joy. I felt peace. The balance sheet was finally correct. Epilogue: a year later, I was in my office on the 40th floor, overlooking Park Avenue. The Phoenix Realty sign on the wall behind me was a sleek silver and blue, with no trace of pink. The company was thriving. We had just closed the Hudson Yards deal with Arthur Vance. He was putting in a mixed-use development, luxury condos, yes, but also affordable housing units and a community center. My phone buzzed. Jake. Hey, Mom. Just finished my econ final. Think I aced it. Also, the mailroom team improved sorting efficiency by 15% this week. Do I get a raise? I smiled. Don't push it, but dinner's on me tonight. 7 p.m. Jake was working hard. He was tired, broke, and humbled, and I had never been prouder of him. He was becoming the man I knew he could be, not the caricature his father tried to mold. There was a knock on my door. Come in. Arthur Vance walked in with a bottle of champagne. To the 1-year anniversary, he said, of the day you burned down the circus. It feels like a lifetime ago, I said, accepting a glass. You know, Arthur said, leaning against my desk. Mark sent me a letter from prison. Wants to know if I'll buy his shares in the old shell companies. He needs commissary money. What did you tell him? I told him, I only do business with the CEO. And the CEO is busy building an empire. We clinked glasses. I looked out at the city skyline. I had lost a husband. I had lost a sister. I had lost a mother. But I had found myself. I was no longer the scapegoat, not the fixer, not the invisible wife. I was Eleanor Fuentes, the architect, and my life, at last, was truly my own. Call to action. Thank you for listening to my story. It hasn't been easy to relive. But if my journey can help just one person stand up to the toxic people in their life, then it has been worth it. Family isn't always blood. Family is the people who respect you, who value you, and who stand by you when the storm hits. If you're holding on to someone just because they're family, but they are hurting you, let them go. You are strong enough to build something new. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes that night? I really want to know. Thanks for watching, take care.